Yo, how's it going everyone? It's me, Arctic. Today's video, we're going to be going over a team comp guide for Raiden Shogun, aka Baal, and this is basically going to cover each of the characters that are going to be good with her, and also each of the team comps that I would generally recommend for her, depending on how you're going to build your Raiden Shogun. I will also be talking about some of the characters that are going to be upcoming, and if I think they will be good, especially, for example, like Kokomi, Sara, and also Aloy, and if they can actually be good in a team comp with Raiden Shogun. But if you are new to the channel, I'm almost at 5,000 subscribers. It helps me out a lot if you guys subscribe. I also stream over on Twitch at twitch.tv/arctic_hakioku, just how it's spelled right here. But anyway, let's get back to the video. So yeah, as you're looking at right here, this is going to be my team comp that I'm using for Raiden Shogun. Basically, this is going to give her the most energy recharge and electro damage bonus. From what I have been calculating, you know. But there's also several other team comps, and so this is going to be a very, very general guide into like what characters are good, and then you can generally build your team comp around my recommendations. So Rosaria for this video will be the stand-in for Raiden Shogun. She is currently holding my build I actually have for my Raiden Shogun as well. But yeah, in terms of characters, we've got a pretty good cast right here. I'll also look in the character archive to see kind of what characters can be good. But first, we're going to start off with some actual team comp structurization. So the first team comp, yeah, it's going to be the energy recharge one. Basically, use your Electro Traveler to boost your energy recharge. And then I've got Kazuha here to basically swirl for Electro and give me a little bit more Electro damage. This team comp really factors more so into a main DPS Baal team comp, where you're trying to maximize her Electro damage and her ult damage, and it works very nicely. The second team comp right here is basically focusing on Eula as the main DPS actually. In terms of on-field main DPS on the field, you know, with her auto attacks being a little bit stronger than how you're going to have your Raiden auto attacks at that moment. And then we've also got like Official on here, or you can use Electro Traveler still. I would actually recommend using Electro Traveler over Official, to be honest. You can get very comparable damage this way. And then we've got like Jean on here, or you can use like another Anemo support, like Sayu maybe. Sayu could be very good for this team because she deals like more consistent damage as well. And yeah, this team overall would be pretty good. You'll be able to trigger lots of superconduct reactions to help out your Eula's physical damage, and it's also going to be good for DPS for both of these characters. Another team comp I could recommend is an Electro Charge team comp, and this is going to be really good even if you don't have Rosaria as your main DPS. You can either use like a Xingqiu, Kazuha. I have Kazuha right here to boost out like the damage of either Hydro damage or Electro damage. Electro damage is what you want to boost because then the Electro Charge damage is actually considered Electro damage. So it's basically going to increase decrease the enemy's resistance to Electro damage. But alternatively, you could also run like Tartaglia basically as your secondary DPS. Because Raiden Shogun's burst does have a limited amount of uptime, however elemental skill is up constantly and basically works like a C6 official. So yeah, this team comp right here would work pretty nice, and you've got like an Anemo support basically to debuff as well. This team comp right here is something that I would actually kind of try out as well. It's basically using Raiden Shogun as like a burst support, your Xiao as like a main DPS, but when he's on cooldown you basically can switch back to your Raiden Shogun. And then you've got Ganyu right here. If you run Ganyu support actually, you'll be able to have her burst ultimate up basically constantly. It has like 100% uptime if you have enough energy recharge. I would actually also use Ganyu with like a 4-piece emblem set. I'm currently working on farming out a set for that to try it out. And then like you can have Chi-Chi right here. If you get like cryo resonance, that can work very nicely with like Xiao's crit rate, giving him a little bit more crit rate, something like that. And yeah, this could work very well. And then this last team comp right here is actually going to be an overload team comp. You're basically using Raiden Shogun to activate overloaded damage. Using like Shangling as a support can work, or you can also use like a Klee, something like that. You can use Official or Electro Traveler, whichever one you want to use. But yeah, personally I would use Official just because of her uptime on her elemental skill. It works very nicely, and you get a little bit of mobility, and it's a pretty good character in terms of like giving yourself like an alternate DPS or like alternate damage burst DPS source. And then you've got Bennett right here to boost out your damage and that kind of stuff. Overloaded is actually pretty good for DPS. I've done like Klee Official combo, pretty good, and it works very nicely, especially if you get Widsith on your Klee. You can basically trigger like a lot of high damage reactions there. Okay, and now we're going to go down a list of all the characters that can work pretty well with Raiden's Shogun. First off, Ayaka. Ayaka is pretty nice with Raiden's Shogun as a like sub DPS or alternate DPS. You can basically make Ayaka your main DPS and then use like Raiden Shogun off the field as a DPS along with some other things. Kazuha is a really very good character to go along with Raiden's Shogun, partially because if you do build him his elemental mastery support, you basically can get like around 30% extra bonus like electro damage based on whatever element he swirls. He works very, very nicely. Eula is very good as well because basically if you are a Eula main, you can definitely benefit from a Raiden Shogun as a support, but it'll also be vice versa if you are using like Raiden's auto attacks as well. Yeah, you can get a lot of benefit from that. Their burst costs and burst timers actually do play into each other pretty well. What you can do is you can use like Raiden Shogun's burst, and then yeah, swap over to Eula. Do Eula's like a DPS combo, which is like E-spell, auto attacks, E-spell, auto attacks, and then E-spell charged after you like go into like your burst, you know, something like that. That can work pretty nicely. And yeah, overall I think their combat will flow very nicely with each other, and I'm definitely going to try it out. Before we get into the rest of the characters, I will say that like Kokomi is going to be a very nice character as a sub DPS for Raiden Shogun. You can basically use her elemental skill for sub DPS if you want to maximize that out. We still don't know the scaling on that, if it's attack or HP percent, so I'll probably keep you guys posted in the upcoming weeks about what it's actually going to be. Pretty good because you can run as like a healer if you guys want, and a sub DPS at the same time, and doing like electro charge reactions, and it could be pretty good. As for Yanfei, I've seen a lot of people wanting to use Yanfei with Raiden Shogun, and I'll say that that is alright. However, Yanfei is more of an on-field DPS, so like you can create like overload reactions, and I've seen a lot of people saying that like Yanfei is an overload enabler for Raiden, but it's actually the reverse, where Yanfei is the one doing the overload reactions, but Raiden Shogun is basically bringing the support with her E, doing that. Rosaria can be alright with Raiden Shogun as well. If you did build your Rosaria physical damage, I guess it could be good, but honestly, Rosaria works way better as a support. She works basically if you want to boost out your like crit rate, something like that, crit rate support. Hu Tao can work pretty nicely with Raiden as well, because what Hu Tao does is she has this like off-field kind of like damage thing, you know, with her Blood Blossoms, and she does have a rotate in with her actual you know, kit and her auto attacks. So she's gonna be similar to like Tartaglia in being like an off-field limited burst DPS, you know. Xiao once again works pretty nicely because you want to either have a sub DPS that it does basically as much damage as your main DPS, or you want to have a alternate DPS, which Xiao is an alternate DPS, so he can work very nicely. Ganyu can work very nicely, especially if you utilize her for most of her ult damage. It can work really, really good. Also, if you are doing like reactions, like stuff like a stringless could actually work very nicely, and like 4-piece emblem set, something like that. That's what I'm actually trying to end up building on my Ganyu. At least in terms of her support set, and it's going to work out pretty good, I think. But then also Ganyu does double as a alternate DPS with her like charge attacks. She can do DPS with that as well, so it works very nicely. She's a very, very good character. Albedo works pretty nicely as well because Electro, even if you are triggering like reactions, like Electro Charge is a fast reaction, and if you are using like a Xingqiu Albedo as your like sub DPSs, this could work pretty good. He won't really necessarily interrupt everything. He also does give a elemental mastery buff with his like burst when you cast it, so that could work pretty nicely as well. Zhongli also works very nicely because of his shield. He can debuff. He can like debuff pretty much everything. He literally debuffs like all elements in the game by like 20%. And then he also has a good burst that you can basically swap in and do a pretty good amount of damage, and also freeze enemies in place, which could be nice even if you are running like an overload comp on the side with this character as well. It wouldn't be that bad if you are running Baal as the main DPS, especially if you have some of her constellations that boost out like your physical damage. If you want physical damage on your Raiden Shogun, it could work pretty nicely. Tartaglia works very, very nicely with Raiden Shogun. Raiden Shogun basically is a very good sub DPS for Tartaglia, and Tartaglia is a good alternate DPS for Raiden Shogun when her burst is down. In addition to that, his Riptide effect, if you do end up proccing that on enemies with like his melee stance, and you go back to Raiden, whenever you're going to defeat enemies, especially if you're fighting like a small group of enemies, whenever you defeat enemies, it's going to spread that Riptide stats between enemies. And yeah, overall, I think that would work very nicely. Diona is a good support as well, basically creating a shield, also enabling like electro reactions like with Superconduct to increase like fizz damage, something like that. Her burst damage is alright. She also doubles as a healer, so if you guys wanted like cryo resonance and don't have like a Chi-Chi, this character can work. Klee once again is very nice as like a burst DPS, using her like bombs and also like an overload reaction DPS. She can work very nicely with Raiden Shogun. Venti and Raiden Shogun are going to be really nice as well, because Venti is going to group up all the enemies. Also, when his burst ends, he restores like energy to party members. And so that is going to be pretty valuable in terms of keeping up your burst uptime, especially if you are going more of a DPS route, using like a low energy recharge, something like that, and more crit damage stats. But yeah, overall his energy recharge won't be that necessary, but yeah, his burst and stuff is very valuable. He's a very valuable character to use. Jing can work nice as a main on-field DPS. Her burst cost does cost 40, so you can basically spam it pretty easily, especially with Raiden's sub DPS elemental skill. Mona is going to work extremely nicely as well with Raiden Shogun, because what you can end up doing is casting Mona's burst before you would use Raiden's burst. And what that's going to do is give you like resolve stacks from Mona's burst and like resolve stacks from Raiden's burst, I believe. And then yeah, Mona, you're going to pop that Mona bubble, you know? And it's going to basically give you that damage bonus for, I think, the whole duration of Raiden's skill right there. And it's going to be pretty valuable for her burst DPS damage. Chi-Chi works nice as a sub DPS. You can run like a 4-piece Mililith set on her and basically get a constant 20% attack bonus basically, and that's how I run my Chi-Chi. She is very consistent on that attack bonus and a support. She's a very nice healer, especially if you are pretty low. She's very tanky, very valuable. Diluc can work as a fine sub DPS slash alternate DPS as well. His DPS combo is pretty strong, and also if you are triggering like overloaded reactions, Diluc is very nice for that as well. He's got very good CC, especially on like larger enemies, so it could be pretty valuable. Jean is like an animo support slash healer. She can do a pretty good amount of like swap in DPS while you're waiting for like your Raiden Shogun to go back off of cooldown. And she doubles as a healer, so it's very nice. Sucrose is good to use as well, because if you do get that swirl reaction, and it basically increases your elemental mastery, this can work very nicely in like electrocharged team comps as well. Chongyun, what you can do with Chongyun is you could actually go like with Cryo Raiden Shogun somehow, and basically convert your stuff into like auto attack damage, you know. Cryo auto attacks could be okay, I guess. A little bit better than physical damage, depending on what enemies you're fighting. Also, he does like he does a pretty decent amount of like swap in damage with his like elemental skill and elemental burst. Noelle can work fine as like an alternate DPS and also like shield support. That's pretty much it. Also, if your Raiden does somehow get really weak and you are using like Staff of Homer or something trying to max out your like damage, this could work very nicely because their passive does create like a shield to help protect you a little bit. Bennett, he's just really good with Raiden Shogun. Like, he boosts her attack, and that's basically it. Fischl works very nicely at C0 and C6. It basically creates a constant amount of, like, electro damage, you know. You have, like, a lot of electro sub DPS. Can work very nicely with, like, a Tartaglia, or, like, a Xingqiu, actually. Ningguang can work fine as well as a burst DPS damage dealer. Also, an alternate DPS. Yeah, DPS combos is what you're kind of looking for. Being able to have a good amount of viability with your old team comp. Xingqiu would work fine as well, because definitely he's going to be very good as a sub DPS for Raiden Shogun, especially in your like burst. I would say that could be really good. Beidou is good as well, especially if you have C6, because C6 reduces like electro resonance. But she's also a very good sub DPS and also alternate DPS on the field. She also has her counter abilities, which can increase like your DPS or like viability with like you know, like being able to swap in, have some utility. Shangling is good, overload comp basically. Also, she does spawn that little chili pepper that gives like a 15% attack bonus, which is nice. You can also use it for like pyro resonance with like Bennett, and it could work pretty good. Razor is alright as like an alternate DPS, but I wouldn't really use him. Barbara is alright because you can use her for like triggering like electrocharge reactions. Lisa is alright as well because you can create like overload reactions, but like is not a very good character in general. Kaya is pretty decent as sub DPS, however I would still say Rosario is probably a little bit better than him just in general, although he does factor in with like energy recharge with his ascension stat, so you could run like a 4-piece emblem on him actually and get a lot of damage from his like cryo icicles. And then Amber is not really that useful. That's where we're going to end the video. Let me know, guys, what team comp you're going to use basically, and yeah, basically pick the best team comp that works with your account, your teams that you have, best characters that you have to use as her supports, or use Raiden as a support for them. But anyway, it's been me. I'll see you guys next time. It's been me, Arctic. I'll see you guys next time. Farewell.